everybody. Mr. Hartman here again with the last section of topic 3, comparison in land-based empires from 1450 to 1750. Okay, so they kind of talk here at the very beginning about large land-based empires being a major theme, as we're pretty clearly talking about here, right? We see both the rule of law in these major empires to kind of solidify their control over these very diverse populations, but at the same time, we also see kind of a blend of the conquered and the conqueror cultures, right? But we also, what I want to kind of get into here to start is failures to maintain authority that we see occur during this time period, especially in the gunpowder empires, right? The empires of the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals. Okay, so they fail for a couple of reasons, right? They can't keep up with the growing power of the European trade companies and Euro trading in general, right? Another issue, they also specifically kind of point out the British there. Another issue is the harem politics kind of creates very poor rulers, right? Right, the harem politics create poor rulers because it wasn't necessarily the best possible candidate who would rule. It would be who was able to successfully defeat their siblings, right? We see, again, that kind of leads to that weak or corrupt leadership that I pointed out earlier. Okay. And then also failure to keep up with the technological developments, especially in military, right? Up with the military technology, especially at the in the context of the Europeans, right? On top of this, we see expensive armies. Right, we see very expensive armies lead to a lot of situations where we see a depletion of the revenues, right, leading to pretty severe financial burdens on the peasants, which is going to lead to a lot of upset peasants and uprisings and rebellions, right? And then also we see religious conflict in between them, right? So yeah. Those are kind of the main issues for the gunpowder empires, who are not going to necessarily collapse during this era, but are certainly setting up for those. Okay. So the next thing I kind of talk about here is the military power of each of these major empires. Okay. And what we see here in a lot of places are a creation of the elite soldier groups. In the Ottomans, we of course had the Janissaries, who are the Christian slave boys who become the elite soldier group in charge of basically protecting the Sultan. And then in the Safavids, we have the Ghulams. That's kind of almost playing the exact same similar group, right, or similar role as them, right? So they're both recruited from religious or ethnic minorities, which gives them a lot of loyalty to the emperor or the Shah and the Safavids, Sultan in the Ottomans and Shah and the Safavids, because they're kind of being uplifted by this whole scenario, right? They talk about the Ghulams coming from Georgia, Armenia, and Circassian populations, the Janissaries from the Christians, right? And then, so that's a big deal there. That gives them a lot of loyalty to the ruler. Okay, they also kind of point out as the Aztecs also doing this, right? And what they called, a blood tax. This idea that different parts of their states need to pay the government with people, right? We still see a lot of war between the Safavids and the Ottomans, right? We see they really fight a lot over religion, right? A lot of religious conflicts, but also border conflicts, right? And trade conflicts. right? The border, right, where the border is, what territories are whose, and trade conflicts over different trade routes. Okay. They also point out as another example the Moroccans versus Songhai as another kind of religious war, right? Um, to Muslim powers, right? We see that Morocco will end the Songhai Empire after sacking their capital, Gao, right? We also see in a lot of places a very so that's one of the kind of they're just again kind of comparing these. We also see bureaucracy in a lot of these territories, a large bureaucracy, right? And in fact, what you actually see eventually is Europeans will go to China to kind of study the bureaucracy there. In the Ming and Qing, of course, we have the return of the civil service system. The civil service exam system returns, right? In the Ottoman Empire, we have the Devshirme system, right, which helps bring not only janissaries but also Christian boys can become administrators, right? And then in the Safavid Empire, they really heavily recruit from Persians. Persians, very well regarded as being good administrators, become the men of the pen. Okay. All right. We also have the Songhai, and in the Songhai Empire, they had the king or the sultan, the Mansa, right? Excuse me. The Mansa employs Muslim bureaucrats, educated Muslim bureaucrats who are usually educated in the madrasas, especially in Timbuktu, right? The Inca did have a system of organization, right? They had a system of organization. They didn't have bureaucrats per se. They had a system of a federated system of provinces, right? Federal meaning that there is some power in these local territories, right? Led by loyal nobles. Oops. Led by loyal nobles, right? And then also we see they talk about the decimal system there. The Aztecs, however, are not very centralized, despite having a massive empire. They were less centralized and less bureaucratic than the kind of comparison states here that we've talked about. They were mostly a tributary state, right? They were a tributary empire, which means they had very little control over the states they conquered, as long as they paid them taxes, whether money or blood, right? And kept their power through military might, right? They kept power through fear. Very effective way to rule, which we're going to see the Spanish utilize to undermine the Aztecs, right? In terms of taxes, we see a lot of different tax systems. We see the Mughals have the zamindars. Okay, so again, the Mughals appoint the zamindars to collect taxes based on land and production. In the Ottomans, we have the tax farmers. Right. We see them. So tax farmers pay an annual fixed sum of money to the central governments. Right, based on kind of what territory they're controlling. Okay. And then they can kind of make more money themselves by collecting money or goods from the residents of the area. That's how they get the tax, right? But then also, of course, what this leads to, since it's a fixed sum, that's open for corruption because the tax farmer can start to take more above that and collect money for themselves, right? And the Aztecs, again, had a tribute system, right, which forced their subjects to pay them tribute, right? And then it's the products of the region, but also people, as we talked about, which especially were important for religious practices, right? Religious sacrifice. The Ming Dynasty uses paper money. And so we see a paper money tax, the problem with that eventually becomes counterfeiting. And then when you see a lot of counterfeiting combined with the hope to kind of print more money, right? The ideas of how paper money works are clearly not well understood yet, at least through hyperinflation, right? When you print more money, right, money just becomes less valuable, right? And so after this, right, we eventually see the main transition to a rice tax, right? So pay in rice, but then eventually even later, silver coins, known as hard currency, right? Because it's called hard currency as opposed to soft currency, which paper money is, because it has actual value within the coin itself, right? Okay. So as we've kind of seen, there are the different ways to create legitimacy for rule, right? Especially when we have these large empires controlling large multi-ethnic, diverse states, right? And so what we see is we start to see non-political, or the need for non-political justifications for rule over these new territories, because a political justification is not going to necessarily be enough for conquered territories, right? And so they pointed out a lot of different examples. They pointed to religion, right, where you have, and so the examples they bring up in Islam, right, the concept of the caliph or the caliph, right, the successor to the prophet, right. In Europe, we have the concept of divine right. In the Songhai dynasty, they talked about the conversion to Islam itself was enough, right, to kind of promote unification. And then in the Aztecs, right, they used sacrifice, right, human sacrifice to the gods to kind of justify their rule, or at least protect their rule. Okay. We have art in the Qing dynasty. They talk about having portraits of the emperors. In the Ottoman Empire, it's miniature paintings. And you can't paint portraits of Muhammad or frankly anybody in Islam, but with Christian society, right, we see a lot of miniature painting. And then in Europe, right, we see right, support for artists, right, by the government, especially during the Renaissance. Okay. And then lastly, we have kind of an offshoot of art, monumental architecture. Basically meaning big buildings. We got the Taj Mahal in the Mughal dynasty, and then we have the Versailles in France. We have the Winter Palace in Russia. And then they talk about something we haven't talked about, El Escorial in Spain. Okay. And so, yeah, that is kind of just a general broad look at different ways that these states of this era are similar and different, right? To kind of maybe list out our main ones that we need to focus on, right? In Europe, we have France, England, the Holy Roman Empire, Spain, and Russia as kind of our major states at the time, with the Holy Roman Empire also including Austria and later Prussia. Okay. In Africa, the only one we've really focused on is Songhai, to a lesser extent Morocco. We obviously have the Ottomans, Safavids, and the Mughals. We haven't talked too much about Southeast Asia. We haven't talked too much about Central Asia. The Mongols are kind of defeated as a group. We obviously have the Ming and the Qing in China. We have the Tokugawa in Japan. We have the Aztecs and the Inca. Or the Aztecs and the Inca in the Americas. Am I missing anything? I mean, you could really go into more detail on Europe if you wanted to, Italy, right, especially, but I don't think that's necessary. Songhai, yeah, I think that's about it. I think that's all the major states that we need to focus on for this era. Okay, I know it looks like a lot, but it's really not too bad. Okay, they haven't even really brought up Tokugawa all that much. Japan's gonna increase importance as we go further into the present, right, closer to the present. But that's going to do it for this topic and this topic 3 in general, right? This whole topic. We're going to move on to topic 4 in the next one, which is all about trade and oceanic connections, which means colonization is here. So until then, I will see you in the next one.